Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Detective Comics by Tinian. Batman discovered Tim Drake isn't actually dead, not by investigating why there were no remains left behind, but because a religious erector set held a magical orb. World's greatest detective, ladies and gentlemen. We continue with Utopia.
Number 963's cover asks an important question. Is Steph trying to fend off Batman with a block of cheese?
Oh no, she found out he's lactose intolerant! It's all over! Why didn't Bruce unmask when he had the chance?
We begin with a flashback to Red Robin and, spoiler alert, both being very stupid, eating with their masks off, despite Tim not needing to take his off to eat, in broad daylight, and all compounded by Steph recording it on her phone, because it's not like those can be hacked or anything, right? Tim actually points this out, but Steph brushes it off because any bad thing can happen at any time, so have fun anyway.
There's fun, then there's stupid. They don't necessarily have to interact. You can have fun with a modicum of intelligence.
Anyway, Tim is grousing about his future at Ivy University, wanting more knowledge to help others, even if it leaves Belfry operations outside his hands. Steph asks if his plans involve her, they kiss, he says there isn't a plan without her, and both are assured they're unstoppable together. Yet another scene solely reliant on their pre-reboot relationship, and exactly nothing established by Tinian. In the present, spoiler alert sneaks through Monster Town by exploding a drone near two Argus agents. Yeah, they'll be fine. That's totally not an insane thing to do that could have gotten them killed. As she meets up with Anarky, she mentions it was her drone, because it's absolutely plausible that someone hiding from everyone all the time, no discernible funds, employment, or resources would have readily available drones.
Just go with it.
She's delivering EpiPens stolen from Penguin to hand out to those in need, which isn't really a distinction from her time under Pointy Ears' wing.
How come every time I try to do this different from Batman, I always end up doing exactly what Batman would do?
Maybe it has something to do with the fact that you're written by someone who fails to acknowledge their own flaws, apparently has very lackadaisical editors, and can't write development to save his keyboard, as exemplified by the fact you're arriving at a conclusion I pointed out last week that you've apparently reached off-panel with no effort? In short...
Thanks, bad writing. Steph wants more than vague talk from someone that refuses to take off their mask. It's a Tinian book, give it 5 minutes. And wants to know about this better way for Gotham Lonnie has been talking about. He puts her mask back on and says she's more than just the help. And that's when they're suddenly surrounded by Argus troops.
Armed strangers all around! Quickly, spoiler alert, take off your mask for no reason!
Clayface is doing some monster gathering and returns to Dr. October's lab in Argus's Monster Town base. He's been in his clay form for 8 hours and unsettled, what with the continued degradation of his morality the longer he's like this. It's necessary for the doc to chart the decay and possibly come up with a cure. In the event he loses control, Batman came bearing necessary countermeasures, but he does have faith Basil no longer wants to harm people. October says he needs to see things from a new angle, and the pain he's feeling must be faced, otherwise he gives power to the darkness.
Hey, what's wrong with darkness? I live in darkness all the time, and look at me! A man that gets shot at while beating criminals up and wearing a bat costume. I'm the picture of mental health.
Batman gets an alert and leaves. I guess his bat Fitbit is telling him he hasn't punched enough faces yet. Back in Anarky's lair, his various traps take out most of the agents while he rambles in generic government-bad accusatory conspiracy jargon. I'm sure those guys buried under bricks are just fine. Feeling his purple compatriot is ready, he takes her to the disused subway tunnels, the history of which he's surprised she already knew after he'd already been droning on about the things Robin already said back in Rise of the Batmen. She'll tell him how she knew in exchange for him taking off his mask. And he does. And it looks like her mask just teleported away in between panels. She says a friend told her about the tunnels and they keep moving. Lonnie says her one-at-a-time way of thinking is too limited to make much change. That Anarky isn't about chaos and throwing incendiaries, which is a comic book villain's version of it.
I'm so much more mature than that. After all, I spell anarchy with a K.
To truly heal the city with the people in charge, she can join his small, tented community.
Just so you know, we've got a crew from a Doomsday Preppers reality show coming to start filming tomorrow. That'll show you the man.
Issue 964, Dystopia, starts the previous day, where Basil is visiting Glory, and I'm pretty sure "it pay to be not be liked at Arkham" is the most glaring grammatical and spelling error I've seen in this run yet. This Incredible Hulk-like speak is pretty much why I'm not sure DC even hires editors anymore. Also, I'm not sure why any one of the victims syndicate would be more despised than any other inmate at Arkham, but don't count on them elaborating on that. Over tea, the two reminisce about one of their movies that they worked hard to get done, using a typewriter, so I'm not sure what time period this is supposed to be, but the chat turns to a possible cure from Dr. October. Nothing 100%, but still possible to put their dark past behind them. Glory doesn't think so. She enjoys their talks, but it doesn't change what he did to her, and cure or not, he'll always be a monster. Presently, Carlo is at 12.5 hours in this form, getting a hollow call of support from Casino. Because remember, they're besties now.
Sure, a good scribe would have developed such a friendship more than one page every few issues, and even played around with whether or not body reading would work on someone with amorphous flesh most of the time. But it takes someone who really doesn't know or care what they're doing to basically say, "They're friends now, feel things!"
Unfortunately, he's gone too long without his power-dampening bracelet and demands October hand it over. He seems to have lost hope in the alleged cure and gets, shall we say, brusque with the scientist. Meanwhile, Lonnie shows off Utopia, where responsibilities are shared. They produce their own food. Doc Tompkins is there. And so is Harper Row.
Burn it. Burn it all down. Get the people out and burn everything, leaving the blue-haired pimple to fry. Only then will it count as Utopia.
And nothing of value was lost.
This is where Harper set up the secondary electrical infrastructure she mentioned several issues ago, and insists Spoiler Alert and Casino join them.
Yeah, with all that dirt around, Harper needs someone to lick her boots, and the Eternal series gave Steph and Orphan so much experience.
I don't know what reasoning she's using to determine that Orphan would love it in a subterranean city. Oh right, bad writing, I almost forgot. Lonnie takes Steph to his quarters, wanting her by his side to change the world, not just Gotham. They make out, which doesn't seem to make much sense since she never showed any attraction to him, and it feels like more faux emotion from this writer, which he just loves throwing around like cow plop at a political rally. But in fairness, she pulls back, saying this isn't what she needs right now, and she's confused enough as it is. Batman, apparently, having learned instant transmission, pops in between them with a hollow image of Anarky meeting with the first victim. Back in the Argus lab, Clayface's aggression is getting worse because of October holding out on him, wrecking some equipment until Casino arrives to calm him down. She dodges his attacks until finding the dampener, or a dampener. Batwing made him a more compact one, so where is it? Anyway, she manages to get the manacle on him by punching through his clay flesh and putting it on? How does that work? And what is making those cracking sounds if she's basically punching through mud? He reverts to normal. October suggests not going past the 12-hour limit anymore, and Basil's all sad that this rage will be with him until he dies.
Why'd they ignore Luke's warning to begin with? Shouldn't the smart doctor have realized the danger and not pushed it? Clayface could have been monitored for a while, then used the power dampener, then monitored again when he's less of a risk. The reasoning here is either poorly explained or really dumb.
Back in Utopia, Batman was nice enough to let Lonnie put his mask back on before they fight, and he admits the first victim helped him build the underground city in exchange for Lonnie constructing the totally 90s edgelord suit of blood and spikes. I guess he's tech-savvy too all of a sudden. The monster attack spurred First Vic into action, making all the people in the community part of the victim syndicate for how Gotham failed them. The next step is to expose Batman's identity, and for that, Lonnie needs Stephanie, who's not really on board. While Anarky was talking down to and about her, she analyzed several of his weaknesses. though that doesn't stop him from ensnaring her. She says not everyone in the world will want to live this way. It allows Harper Rowan, so case closed. Before he can hit an ominous button on his staff to retaliate, Bats bonks him and takes the punk out of the caves, willing to leave the people to their city, but they don't need Lonnie. Not sure if they're better off, though. Harper's still there, after all. He tries to talk to Spoiler Alert, but she takes off before he says out loud in front of the villain that Tim's alive. Because why should anyone bother with secret identities anymore? It's just too much work. In the Belfry, Cassino goes to Clayface, who tells her to get away, but she says they're the same, and he falls to his knees, hugging her.
Feel sad! Feel sad! Feel sad!
We go to Arkham Asylum now. Wait, was it now before? I don't get this. It was now when Clayface was getting antsy at the beginning. Why is the new now? Okay, I'm just gonna stop before I give myself a migraine. With help from a guard, Lonnie passes a cell phone to the first Vic, one which has fully cloned Stephanie's phone, along with all the evidence they need.
He would probably be construed as a domestic terrorist, but that doesn't qualify him as insane. I'm pretty sure if Argus wasn't looking to lock him up themselves, he'd probably be in police lockup before heading right to Blackgate. So, why is he in Arkham Asylum?
You know, where his confirmed accomplice is? Oh, that's right, because how else will he be able to somehow smuggle a clone of Spoiler Alert's phone to Bloodface, proving the incompetence of the allegedly smart daughter of two certifiable geniuses? Kind of like Dr. October, whose intellect I'd say is kind of ambiguous, didn't seem to have a reason to push beyond a safe time limit for Clayface. Sure, intelligent people can make mistakes. Tinian keeps saying how smart this character or that is, but showing how dumb they are. I mean, how else do you explain Batman having any trouble with Anarky beyond punching him in the face and dragging him out? As for Basil and Cassino, like I've said before, there's really no relationship here. It's mostly just moments like this where the big scary monster is made to look sympathetic and humanized because the teenage girl sees the good inside for some reason. They've talked a little, but it doesn't feel fully developed or well-founded at all. They've been rushed to a stage of trust that should have taken a lot more time and focus. Really, the only thing that makes them the same is retcons by a mediocre writer that just sped things up to get to the next crying session.
That was sappy, manipulative drivel.
All this two-parter did, other than end on a tease for a future story, was give us more of versions of characters that aren't as good as they used to be.
I wanted to see your utopia, but now I see it as more of a fruitopia.
Anyway, we come to 965, beginning A Lonely Place of Living.
Like a lonely place of dying, but with living instead? It's not very clever, but it'll remind readers of 90s comics and the pivotal event in Tim Drake's life, and that's all this story really needs.
It starts off with Red Robin and one of those containment hula hoops from the first Superman movie, explaining his original origin to Mr. Oz. He'd seen the original Robin do a trick perfected by the Flying Graysons, whose act a much younger Tim was attending the night Dick's parents died. The death of Jason Todd caused Batman to behave more dangerous to himself and others, and without a Robin, Gotham could lose the protector it needed. When he failed to convince Nightwing to go back to his old identity, Tim, seeing the big picture no one else did, and as well as a means to fix things, took the responsibility of the next boy wonder upon himself. As we see in this, let's call it an homage to the first time he suited up in his own Robin suit in the early 90s. My biggest problem with this is his teeth. They look like they fused together and it makes his smile look really goofy. Tim knew Batman needed people, despite his reputation as a loner, and the Belfry team was a means of providing a readily available support system. And I guess at some point the team fought dragons or something. Bruce, meanwhile, has gone without sleep for 5 days looking for Tim in vain.
Well, the whole going days without sleep thing is a common tool in showing a character's desperation, determination, focus on a problem, and so forth. In reality, it's a handy way to lose your mental faculties and die. But I'm sure the occasional nodding off in his chair just offsets all that somehow.
Oz asks for the real reason Tim was walking away from crime fighting, if he'd replace his mentor should he fall and the Belfry plan didn't last and the worst of humanity asserted itself. Abelar's answer is that he's done being interrogated. He realized Oz's lair was using Kryptonian coding, which he is partially familiar with, breaks free from his cage and attacks his captor, demanding answers. Oz knocks him aside and rips apart a perfectly good cloak on a painted-looking splash page, claiming to be just as much a prisoner as his... prisoner. Formally revealing himself as Superman's dad, Jor-El, he makes vague references to Dr. Manhattan and claims his abduction was all a means of saving Tim, as he'd seen himself in the teenager and wanted to help him be more selfish and not return to his old life.
You see, because I find ambiguous similarities between us, you either have to turn your back on your friends or become all cynical and jaded like me. Those are your only two options. It's all in this self-help book I wrote with Zack Snyder.
Then Jor suddenly decides that Red Robin's mind is prison enough for him and teleports away. Tim uses the computers to send a message to Batman and quickly gets an answer. But the call is coming from inside the containment cells. Tim shuts the shields down and finds Batman, who has a gun. The very gun that killed the Waynes. Modified, redeeming a tool of evil. This isn't Bruce, but a future Tim Drake. Then Doomsday busts through the wall because he was a prisoner too, and Red R opened all the cells.
You know, before the reboot, there was a storyline in Jeff Johns' Teen Titans that saw a future where the adult members of the team had grown darker, harsher, and cynical as they'd adopted legacy identities, including Tim as Batman. I'm sure this writer's take will be oh so...
Number 966, the alternate cover of which features Bat-Tim with two identical guns. Did he grab the Wayne murder weapon from an alternate Earth or something? We start off in the future, where he's confronting Anarky, who won't give up someone's location, and calls him a fascist. So Drake just shoots him.
Oh no, he was such a compelling character. Truly, Tim has gone too far.
He's chased off by a squad of cops led by Commissioner Renee Montoya, since Free Gotham doesn't want him around. In the Batcave, now with Brother Eye, and after disregarding a plea from Superman about how Bat-Tim needs people, how subtle, he decrypts a device he pulled from Anarky. It has a conversation between Lonnie and Stephanie Brown, sneaking back into Gotham and noting how she doesn't recognize what Tim has become. This is apparently the most recent recording, but it doesn't read like something recorded with intent. Unless Lonnie's paranoia took some kind of shift, I don't see any reason for this video to exist other than to exposit for Tim and tease a few things about the possible future. Anyway, it was then he was taken by Manhattan, and we go to the present day. He's momentarily stopped Doomsday with synthetic kryptonite, one tool among many he's cooked up against various enemies of the Justice League that he keeps on him at all times. I'm sure he's a blast at parties. While he couldn't fight as well as the other Robins, he'd invested a lot of time planning every outcome to a fight. As for their current predicament, he's been captive for a year outside Hypertime. But since he was in young Tim's cell, I guess Jor-El just swapped them out every so often? His suit also has boom tube tech, which, with the right frequency, could be used to take them to young Tim's Gotham, and then eventually his own timeline. This is all a bit much for Red Robin, but Bat-Tim understands, since he remembers an echo of this conversation. Either way, duck.
Duck? What does that mean? You think I'm going to change my hero name to a duck? Like, what, start going by Drake? That'd be totally ridiculous.
After stalling Doomsday some more, Bat-Tim elaborates that time asserts itself in the proper order.
Unless James Tynion IV is writing, in which case expect his lousy retcons to stick around, regardless of how antithetical and hackneyed they are.
The older of the two remembers being Red Robin, encountering an older version of himself that horrified him with the use of lethal force. Not exact to this meeting, but nothing stopped the destined outcome. After Bruce's death, Grayson filled in for a time, but actually built a family life beyond the cowl, and would soon move on, with Tim unable to change his mind. Red Hood never took on the mantle of the Bat, as he'd ended up on the other side of the planet, a vagabond that lost an eye and a leg after fighting some mystic ninjas. While future Tim looked for Jason, Damian wore the ears and nearly burned Gotham to the ground.
So, Tynion does that so much, I doubt anyone in a future Gotham would really be fazed by it anymore.
Older Drake is implied to have killed Damian, and insists his younger self will learn moral relativity soon enough. He left his team for Ivy University, and the Gotham Knights Protocol, aka the Belfry team, fell apart after a few months because it couldn't function without him, and Batwoman can't be trusted for some reason. They start shoving each other, which looks a whole lot funnier than I think they intended, and Bat-Tim says he didn't want to accept things either, but his own attempts at altering events didn't work. Some points in the timeline are fixed, Tim. Some choices are made for you.
Except Cassandra and Steph, their timelines are broken and will stay that way 'cause sadness and poetry.
Doomsday's charging them again, but he's immediately distracted by a hologram of Superman, leading him back to his cell. Old Tim says that the cosmic entity that abducted them did so because present and future Drakes could have put together the pieces of whatever it was planning, so letting them go now means those plans are about to kick off. With some hesitation on the teen's part, he goes with his angsty self in order to return home. They teleport to a Gotham alleyway, and before he leaves, Bat-Tim tells his younger self to make amends with Connor, meaning pre-Flashpoint Superboy, but Red R doesn't know who that is. Within what seems like seconds, because in this series technology is magic, so future tech must be super magic, Future Bats has Brother Eye download information on the current timeline, and he notes how some stuff is the same, but some things have been altered imperceptibly.
These are not imperceptible changes, you clod! Tinian is either very deluded, trolling, or he's using fancy words he doesn't understand.
Further testing this conundrum, Bat-Tim slices his young self's arm, like a rational person, and confirms he now has a scar. Confident he can free himself from this fate, and of course he cries about it. I know I'm not showing the panel, but given this writer, you know I'm not lying. He incapacitates young Drake and heads off to kill the one responsible for his dark future and the fall of the Batmen. Batwoman! Number 967 opens with Bruce, still tirelessly searching for Tim, despite Alfred's protestations and threats of using Scarecrow-based knockout gas. Not sure why they have to be based on a villain. Batman has his own knockout gas, but whatever. He says he spent a week and a half examining Tim's remains, trying to get every angle under a protocol he set up after Damian's demise. But in hindsight, it seems that who or whatever took Tim knew how to throw bats off the trail to meticulous detail.
Honestly, this would feel less like a last-minute cop-out if we'd seen some of this alleged examination shortly after the fact. I know Dr. Manhattan being a deus ex machina is a factor, but that's less Tinian and more higher-up decisions, and doesn't excuse his mistakes.
Wayne is frustrated at the idea of Tim being trapped somewhere with his detective mentor not looking for him, and that's when Red Robin's beacon pops up in Gotham.
Double-check that it's not a glitch this time. The people at the Red Robin restaurant did not appreciate the smoke bombs and me breaking the manager's femur. Good steak fries, though.
The Batmobile races to the alley, but Tim has stumbled his way into a nearby hospital without most of his costume, so it's passed off as workout gear. He's going into cardiac arrest, but the doctors manage to stabilize him. Having discarded his suit in the stairwell, Bruce enters the room saying he's the boy's legal guardian and wants everyone to get out because he owns the hospital.
I'm in charge, and I don't care about your opinion.
They hug, and Tim wastes no time in asking where Kate is, and she happens to be somewhere brightly lit considering it was just nighttime, talking with Bet, who might still be her cousin, I don't know, and is aware of her dual identity. She notes how happy working with the Bat family has made the redhead, which Kate chastises her for mentioning in such a crowded place. Volume!
Yeah, it's not like these costume crime fighters written by Tinian have ever said their real names with civilians around or taken off their masks out in the open where anyone could see. Repeatedly!
On leave from West Point, Bet wants on the team as Flamebird, but Kate wants her to have the same training she had before even discussing it with Batman. She gets a very subtle notice on her phone, doesn't jeopardize her identity or anything, and leaves, ordering Bet to stick with the uniform for now. Batwoman arrives at the Belfry as everyone is welcoming back the alive Tim, who's hugging Cassino.
This has such grand emotional impact, what with the constant scenes of them hanging out as friends, so this hug in no way feels like hollow, manipulative drivel. I mean, there was that one issue where they... But then the time when... You know, the one with the... But there was the scene that...
Getting right to it, Red R explains how his disgruntled future Bat self plans on killing Kate for some act in the near future. Tim pauses, wanting to explain the rest for spoiler alert, who's certainly on her way to her own little hideout in an abandoned warehouse. Man, which villain did she have to fight and inexplicably beat to get this primo real estate? She even has a holographic shrine to her dad for some reason. She listens to reports of a terrorist attack thwarted by Superman when Bat Tim emerges from the shadows, apologizes for not listening to her, and then disappears before she can tell who was there. Now he's gone and confused his past girlfriend. That's not going to help their relationship at all. Batwoman is put in a holding cell for protection, since older Drake would expect her to confront him and experienced enough to kill her. Jokes are made about Tim never mentioning the headcanon name Gotham Knights he gave them all, and it's another very rare, genuinely decent moment. He and Luke start chatting like how the Belfry's subroutines were so advanced it cost Batwing 3 computers trying to crack them. And if you recall my Batman Punisher review from year 2 of the crossover, you'll recognize some hacker speak, as Tim says he'd set up nastygrams after his data had been compromised, and can give Lucas the magic cookie to access everything. I refuse to believe that some of those are real words.
Yes.
Yes, you do refuse to believe them because I command it so.
I thought you couldn't speak in complete sentences.
Forsooth, poetry, Shakespeare.
Okay, never mind, that makes sense now.
Future Tim goes to visit Alfred in the greenhouse at Wayne Manor, with the butler immediately recognizing he's not the usual Batman. Imagine if this had been some random prankster that sneaked onto the grounds in a Batman costume they got from Halloween USA or something. This response would have given away Batman's secret. Though again, these characters have called each other's names in public so much that joke doesn't really seem so far-fetched. Alfred's just happy to see Tim again, even if he's older by 2 decades. He wanted to get Pennyworth's perspective, asking if he could find a way to free himself from being Batman by doing something really terrible, should he do it. But he doesn't get an answer when Nightwing, Red Hood, and Robin, along with Titus, show up to make sure he goes back to his own time. But this Tim had spent years training with holo programs of each of them at their peak, so he defeats them off-panel and tosses them into the Batcave, as Bats and Red Robin finally arrive. I guess he had contingencies against the dog, too. Present Tim tries to reason with him, saying he can't beat them all, and they can instead find a way to help future Bat work through his problems.
You think I would risk coming to the Batcave to tie up some residual emotions for a life I lost decades ago?
Dude, have you forgotten who's been writing you? Maybe the emotions involved were too complex for him at this time, as in, they couldn't begin and end with crying and hugs. Also, if this wasn't about emotional resolution, why are you asking Alfred to okay your murder plot?
He connects the Bat computer to a program that present-day Bruce is still working on, but mid-30s Tim will eventually perfect the point of being controlled from his suit. Brother Eye.
I'd like to be sympathetic to his plight, a terrible future where he's compromised his morals, made terrible decisions down a path he didn't want. But screw him for hurting a dog!
Number 968, with a cover that proves Tinian has never met a nostalgic reference he didn't like coveting. We begin on a stormy night on the colony airship. Gotta wonder how these huge flying fortresses deal with lightning. Anyway, Ulysses Armstrong is recording a complaint message to Colonel Kane, Draft 73-C. He's been demoted from weapons development to basic coding for being a deranged sociopath. He claims he's willing to toe the line, even if he disagrees with the criticisms, when something alerts him. The Red Robin suit he stole, which I guess no one in the Belfry noticed was missing this whole time, is interfacing with 2 other versions in Gotham.
That shouldn't be possible. Red Robin is supposed to be dead.
Sounds to me like someone's got a case of the Sposdas.
That's when Brother Eye takes over and launches the drone fleet to eliminate Batwoman, which at first freaks Ulysses out, until figuring this is an opportunity to finally sit back and watch what his creations can do. Taking out Red Robin in the hail of weapons fire wasn't enough? Why is this supposed to be so special for him? Because they're going after the Colonel's daughter or something? Anyway, in the Batcave, future Tim fights everyone off, saying their struggle is pointless, they can't save Batwoman, and his future is too complicated to simply show them what goes wrong to avoid it from happening. How convenient. Though, in solidarity with many real-world readers, I'm sure, he says killing Damian might be a good idea because of what he apparently does to John Kent, Superman's son. Then he gets all distorted.
If he's anything like that old tube TV my brother and I used to play the Sega Genesis on back in the day, just give him a good couple smacks to the side and he should clear up.
Removing his mask, because again this is a Tinian story, he confronts Batman with his hidden fear that his mantle is a curse, poisoning his wards and ruining their lives, something future Bruce confessed to on his deathbed. This sounds like something Bruce has faced before, but Tinian's story where emotional manipulation reigns, so it of course leaves him vulnerable enough to a tasering. With time running out because of a rising tachyon charge, Bat-Tim 6 Batmobiles on Grayson and the others while he takes off, with present Tim watching and ing from the shadows, because his older self grunted that way before, and I guess it's supposed to be significant that he's doing it now. At the Belfry, Bro-Eye has opened Batwoman's cell as drones crash their way inside, and rather than retreat while Kate holds them off, Orphan says they should do this together. I guess mostly for a big hero shot because it looks all cool and whatnot. Red R follows his time-displaced counterpart to one of the bullet train cars, which was all part of his plan. He glitches again, a sign of hypertime fighting against the changes of the time stream being attempted, but since he hasn't been pulled back yet, there's still a chance. In a few weeks, he says, Batwoman does something that breaks Tim's spirit and shatters his belief that the world can be made better. Old Tim says he can go to college, be with Steph, and leave the costumes behind, finally be free. As they arrive at the Belfry terminal, Red Rob is knocked out because he wasn't going to just let one of his Bat commanders die, and Bat-Tim pauses the assault on the team as he makes a shield bubble to kill Kate personally. He says that, despite having held her in high regard, she only destroys people piece by piece, and her confident voice belied a more self-serving attitude, which didn't so much tick Drake off as it was disappointing.
I'm not murderously angry, I'm murderously disappointed.
Before he opens fire, his gun is sliced at the barrel by a batarang from Red Robin. Mark another screw-up by the super-prepared guy from the future. The shield falls, and the Belfry systems won't respond to Bat-Tim, because control has been funneled to the subsystems rebuilt by Batwing. It'll take Brother Eye about 10 minutes to hack through, but from what I hear, you don't have that long. And Bat-Tim starts time glitching again.
How did you hear that? What is your estimation of his remaining time even based on? Maybe Tim heard his tachyon charge was at 40% and rising back in the cave, but what do either he or Luke know about its relation to time travel?
Maybe it's just supposed to be some cool action movie line or something, for when Kate and Red R start smacking Quantum Dork around. He orders the drones to take out the whole tower, but Batman and Robins, past and present, arrive in Bat-planes to destroy them all. These older model aircraft were immune to Brother Eye's takeover of all the other vehicles, which were in the process of attacking them while Bats was knocked out in the cave.
Well, sir, I won't bore you with the details of our miraculous escape.
Instead of further butt-kicking, Red Robin opts for a heartfelt monologue about being fully aware of the cost of the crime fighter life and how painful it can be. I've lost teammates. I've watched cities burn and people die.
Technically, you've seen Gotham burn multiple times, and all under this writer, I'm pretty sure.
Batman and Robin means to him, and to people around the world, that you can take a stand, make things better whoever you are. Though having infinite money certainly helps, but he doesn't mention that. Life doesn't need to be lonely. You can bring in those who lift you up, make you stronger.
Oh boy, so you actually learned something today? What is this, Full House?
Though if they're lifting you up, that'll make them stronger, so win-win, I suppose. You can be a full person.
Not if you're written by Tinian. He always writes characters to be a fraction of who they used to be.
Brother Eye completely recedes from the computers it invaded and back into Bat-Tim's suit. The speech wasn't terribly convincing, and as he's pulled back to his own time, he warns his younger self to hold on, because things will be over sooner than he can imagine. The story ends on the smoldering remains of battle, with Tim unresponsive to repeated calls asking what's going on.
That was a lonely place of living, which, while possessing a couple of positives, was mostly a middling little exercise of storytelling.
We get a bit of a glimpse of what future Tim's world was like, and a lot of vague talk to be convinced that this would be a legitimate outcome for this character. It certainly lacked the pow it could have had, but this writer has done worse with tell versus show. I wouldn't call this an improvement, however. At first, when it was thought that you couldn't change past events, neither Drake thinks of the possibility of alternate timelines that would coexist separately, kind of like future Trunks' timeline from Dragon Ball Z. That should have been a given when present Tim didn't recognize Connor, and things were different from what his older self had analyzed. Bat Tim even said that what he remembered of the talk of Oz's lair wasn't exact to how things were playing out. When it turns out things could be changed, not only does he not consider that it wouldn't affect his timeline, he doesn't consider telling people what Kate does, which would have been a lot quicker. Oh, but vague teases for a future story, that's the same thing as having substance, right?
Nice touch, basically giving Tim his non-stupid original origin. Too bad Tinian never had the sense of decency to do the same thing for a couple other characters I could name. But he didn't reinvent Tim, so James probably doesn't have the sentimental feelings towards other writers' terrible ideas. Just his own.
But it's by no means a perfect restoration. Big shocker, I know. While his wanting to help Batman through a loss is there, it doesn't clear up the inconsistencies with the New 52 era. Namely, Tim figured this out because he was more of a deductive prodigy than a tech genius, and it's the latter element that has been maintained. Sure, he could be both, but it's obvious they have not chosen that path. He's a tech genius like a whole bunch of other characters we've seen in this title, but we're supposed to think he was plucked by Dr. Manhattan for piecing things together simply because he's Tim Drake. We never saw him question some event that you'd think would show up on Manhattan's radar, but we're supposed to just go with it. I think this whole fake death thing was a compromise with DC editorial, who wanted Tim dead for real, which, since that'd be Dan Didio, wouldn't surprise me, but even so, it's on pretty weak ground. Speaking of weak, Tim's speech about having a full life. No point in this story, nor during his captivity and other issues, proves a foundation for him learning that he can be a crime fighter and have a personal life and maintain his moral compass. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying the story doesn't teach him that lesson at all. He was going to pause his crime fighting, go to college, help people, then fake died, got imprisoned, met his future self, heard about horrible future scenario number 5247-F, fought future self, and waited out the tachyon clock for him to be pulled back to his own time. Little wonder this monologue didn't convince Bat Tim. Even he knew it was based on nothing.
Too bad we didn't learn it sooner. We could have gone to the movies instead.
Though, I am curious. The team has known for a while Tim's alive, and none of them thought to track down spoiler alert to tell her? I mean, they were such good friends and important to each other after all. Either this wasn't something Tinian thought about, or he made a bunch of characters dumber in order to artificially build up another one. Again. Oh, but that couldn't be. How could Batman, one of the greatest superheroes and detectives on the planet, possibly track down or stop a girl walking away from him?
Another potentially interesting story held together mostly by chewing gum, the writer's hopes, and a few nostalgic references. We're more than halfway through the run, so will the comics ahead bear fruit that makes everything fit together in a grand, brilliant narrative? I can't see the future, but I kinda doubt it. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.